If you drive along Route 100, not far from here, you will see a big sign over to the side, Xenia, Xenia, right? This is the name of a Greek restaurant, and if you haven't seen it, now you will look for it as you move along that stretch of road. Xenia, this Greek restaurant, is named for the Greek word for hospitality. Now, hospitality in ancient times and with the Greek world is important for us today as we see the scripture. Xenia, meaning not only the ability to be kind or welcoming, but that sense of philoxenia, that you are with your fellow person and you are going to do what you can to extend the depth of your guest friendship, right? Guest friendship. Now, the word in Greek xenia isn't actually in the scripture today, but knowing the concept of what xenia meant, and it is in other places in scripture, is important to unpacking this scripture. Our understanding of what it means to be hospitable. In the scripture, we see the reception that the townspeople have for two missionaries, Paul and Barnabas. It is a lavish, amazed, and bending over backward attempt to worship them, which makes them highly uncomfortable. After they have healed a lame man, Paul has, this kind of healing is echoed from previous places, but this is a distinct reaction that we're seeing from the townspeople. They're so quick to worship, have you noticed? A little background can be helpful for us. Ovid, who was a Greek writer or someone working in the Greek tradition around that area, about 30 years prior, had shared stories from Greco-Roman gods, piecing together myth and tradition and perhaps stirring the pot with his own revelations. Again, 30 or 40 years right there in the region of which Paul and Barnabas were operating. And here in this scripture from Metamorphosis 8 features Zeus and Hermes coming to a town in the guise of humans. Humans mistake them for other humans, but even though the townspeople do not give them a good reception, again, they look like humans, ordinary humans coming to town, there is one odd old couple who treat them hospitably, welcoming them into their humble abode with the best of food that they can offer, even chasing down a goose in the yard. The couple is Bacchus and Philemon, and they treat the strangers as they would, being open to gods, even though others had not. And as a result, unfortunately, the town is destroyed, but the hospitable couple lives, thrives, and then are turned into trees, lime and oak. And it's a part of a myth about these two liking to live together. So imagine if you are taught to believe quite religiously that any visitor could be a god in disguise. And you'll be looking for clues that when visitors come to town, are these the gods of which we have been told will arrive? And the literal fear of God is in you about what could befall you should you not show xenia. Should you not be hospitable? In our Bible passage, even the Zeus priests are ready to worship, either because they have their own belief or maybe they're trying to profit in some way. We do not know. So Paul and Barnabas are not equipped because they are not centered in the culture of that place. Now they know Paul is very versatile and knows Greek and is able to adapt, but they don't know the dialect of this specific region. How many times may we have found ourselves perhaps wanting to fit in or blend in or understand or even pick up a couple of words here and there in order to understand the culture of which we find ourselves in? And though Paul and Barnabas are very skilled and adaptive, they found themselves in a place with a response that they don't get. But they do know, they feel it in their hearts that they know that they are not God. And so in response, when they hear that people are seeking to worship them and coming out of their places in order to offer sacrifices, they say that they are definitely not gods. But Paul sees it and flips that opportunity, always ready to adapt, to move into the surprise, and to be of this spirit. He pulls out that egg, if you will, and he says, we're not gods, but God has been with you this whole entire time. In the miraculous everyday realities of human life, this is language that may have sounded familiar to them again, because when they thought about what the gods provided, the rain, the crops. It is God who is present and has been providing this whole time. God has been offering blessing upon blessing with each raindrop and is a giver of all good things. As excited as you are now, you can be excited by the everyday presence of God. Through the lens of Paul, essentially we hear that it is God who has been the chief host all this time, the outpouring of xenia with humankind, and the major source of that xenia through loving, healing Spirit of Christ. A new host, if you will, someone to be a reminder pointing to the radical nature and love of God that is all around us and can live through us when we extend ourselves in relationship as part of the spearing healing of God in the world. We might then assume that the best way to honor God is to be hospitable ourselves to each person, whether God or not, knowing the divine spark that is alive in our midst. We recall from Matthew not long ago from Jesus some weeks back that each time we clothe the naked, feed the hungry, visit the prisoner, we are tending to Jesus. For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. The depth of xenia, hearing it in a new way, not for fear of the retribution that would fall if you don't do such and such, but the blessing that comes when we time and time again, like the rains that are falling, choose in everything to be generous. In Hebrews, we have this familiar phrase, do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing that, some have entertained angels without knowing it. Now we know that the people of that area of Lystra were especially inclined to think about that visitation of Zeus and Hermes. So when Paul and Barnabas do show up, this has in some way been expected. But the miracle performed overwhelms them, and they credit the wrong source. But they are ready to believe so very much that God is in their midst. It doesn't matter who comes to the door, they will be generous. So even if they don't get it quite right, we learn from these townspeople themselves to be so very much at the ready that you're willing to pour yourself out and humbly give yourself over to signs of what will be a spirit in your midst. Now, it's true. We as moderns are very disinclined to believe in anything supernatural. It takes to these passages and let ourselves go into the spirit of the lame who walked and these gods that are potentially bumbling around. What do we do with that? But the reality is what we've heard this morning beautifully already in community response, that the spirit of healing is there. It's in those relationships again. It's in the rain that falls. And it's in the generosity we can mirror back from our own lived existence. And so in doing, live out the spirit of Christ. Sometimes we worship the container of which something comes to us in, as they worship Paul and Barnabas. Sometimes it is celebrity worship of which we find ourselves awed and inspired by what one human can do. Sometimes it's a particular kind of worship that we begin to worship for itself because it provides us comfort and order, and we think we can find ourselves in it and see God in it. But as we know in life, things change and shift. As we've acknowledged, sometimes communities close, sometimes we are called forward in ways in which we cannot expect. And we have to pause and ask ourselves, are we worshiping the thing that holds and helps us to see God? Or are we worshiping God, God's self? And so in these moments, as we prepare to go out from this place, wondering how this worship service and all its upside downness, how it will strike us and what we will remember from now. You might be in the camp that loves it or the camp that hates it. I just pray that God has showed up for you today and that you have been hospitable in your heart, ready to receive that which you might not have expected, whatever it is that the first label that might come on it, to dig deep and to see the sacred that is unfolding with each day, each moment, and certainly in this moment that we share. so that when things that are very striking do happen, whether for good or ill, we can embrace the miracle that is there through the Spirit bringing about healing, to pay attention, to really be silent for a moment and to pay attention about how the rain hits the roof, to hear and feel the Spirit of healing at work, and know that that can come in very monumental or sometimes very microscopic ways.